Welcome the anointed ones. When God runs out of patience, he doesn't raise his voice, he raises his hand. Chosen ones, let me take you somewhere deep for a moment. Did you know that in the field of medicine, there are sicknesses doctors call psychosomatic? Illnesses that are not born from bacteria or viruses, but from the poison of the mind and soul. That means you can literally think yourself sick, hate yourself sick, envy yourself sick, and curse yourself into a hospital bed. Now, imagine multiplying that by the weight of divine judgment, because that's exactly what your enemies just walked into. See, they didn't just mess with you. They messed with the covenant wrapped around you. And God, being merciful, gave them time to stop, repent, and retreat. But they laughed, they mocked, they doubled down. They thought silence was weakness. They mistook patience for permission. And now, well, let's just say, God pulled out the final notice letter. And it wasn't typed, it was written in their own bodies. Think about it. They prayed for your downfall, but their own legs gave out. They wished you sleepless nights, but now their own pillows feel like battlegrounds. They wanted your name dragged, but now their own name is being whispered around with pity and disgust. And the funniest part, they're still trying to act like nothing's wrong, walking around with the confidence of a Wi-Fi signal at 2 bars, pretending it's strong, but everyone knows it's shaky. So buckle up, because today we're not sugarcoating anything. We're diving into the reality of what happens when enemies ignore divine warnings. You're about to see how sickness becomes prophecy, how affliction becomes evidence, and how God himself proves to the world that you are untouchable. This isn't karma, this isn't coincidence, this is covenant enforcement. And trust me, once you hear this, you'll never look at your enemy's struggles the same way again. Number 1. Their sickness is the manifestation of their hidden disease. Their sickness is not random. It is the body telling the truth about what has been hiding inside for years. You see, hatred, envy, bitterness, and malice are not just emotions people carry around lightly, they are toxins. They don't stay in the heart and mind as harmless feelings. They begin to rot, corrode, and contaminate everything from the inside out. What they thought they were directing at you has been quietly fermenting in their own system, waiting for the day it would show up in full force. That day has come, and it has taken the form of sickness. This is why their illness looks so personal, almost tailor-made, because it is. It is the perfect reflection of what they carried secretly in their spirit. When someone feeds on jealousy every single day, when they make gossip their diet and slander their oxygen, it becomes impossible for the body to hold the weight of that filth without collapsing. They thought they were destroying you with their negativity, but they were incubating their own destruction. It's not punishment without cause, it's exposure of a disease they nurtured in the dark. What's striking is how people around them may not connect the dots. To the outside world, it looks like bad luck, stress, or just a turn of events. But the truth is deeper. God allowed what was spiritual to take physical form, so no one could deny what's really going on. That hidden rot had to come out, and the body became the canvas on which judgment was painted. There's another layer here. Sickness makes them live inside the very prison they tried to build for you. They wanted you broken, weak, drained, and struggling to rise. Instead, that is exactly where they find themselves, trapped in a body that refuses to cooperate. The body has become the executioner of the soul's corruption. This is the brutal honesty of it all. The sickness is not an accident, it is the inevitable conclusion of years of spiritual contamination. Their hidden disease could not stay hidden forever. It surfaced in a way that cannot be denied. And the irony? They spent so much time plotting your downfall, but their own collapse was already written into their bones. Number 2. God let them feast first so their fall would be public. They celebrated first, and that celebration is part of the story. God allowed them to taste triumph so their downfall would be visible and undeniable. When people gloat, throw parties, and parade their victory over someone else, they are making a public claim about the outcome of the battle. Granting them that moment of celebration was a deliberate act of divine timing. It made their arrogance loud and recorded. It removed any excuse of secrecy or misunderstanding. When the fall came after the feast, it read like a judgment stamped on the same stage where they danced. That visibility is important because justice that happens in the shadows can be written off as chance, coincidence, or bad luck. But when God times a reversal to land after their celebration, the reversal becomes a witness. Their own triumph becomes the billboard that explains why the reversal came. The feast becomes the context. Their collapse becomes the correction. There is also a sharp lesson in timing for everyone watching. Mercy often looks like delay, and a delayed response can be mistaken for indifference. By allowing them to celebrate, God tested whether their victory would soften them or harden them. They hardened. Their laughter continued. Their insults grew louder. That refusal to pause turned mercy into evidence. The public nature of the fall also protects the chosen one from private smear campaigns. When enemies stage a smear in private, the targeted person can be left isolated and doubted. But a public reversal after a public celebration exposes the liar and restores credibility. It rewrites the narrative in front of the same audience that once believed the lie. There is a strategic brutality to this. God could correct injustice quietly, but a quiet correction would not serve as a deterrent. By staging the fall after the feast, God turns the moment into a lesson for others who might follow the same path. It says clearly that patience is not permission to persist in cruelty. Finally, their feast, then fall arc proves that timing matters in spiritual affairs. Immediate retribution would be messy and could be dismissed as revenge. A delayed public unmasking removes ambiguity and forces accountability. Their laughter becomes the echo that reveals them, and the people who watch their dance become witnesses to the truth. Number 3. The sickness is customized to their sin. Their sickness is not a random strike, it's a direct reflection of the very sin they refuse to let go of. Each affliction they face is connected to the way they handled you and others. When someone uses their tongue like a weapon, it is not surprising when their voice is silenced by illness. When someone spends their energy crushing others, it is not shocking when their own strength begins to fade. This is not coincidence, it's precision. The punishment mirrors the crime because God deals in accuracy, not accidents. Think about how targeted it feels. Some of them lose their peace of mind because they tried to torment yours. Some are restless in their own homes because they plotted against your stability. Others find themselves weak and fragile because they misused their power against the vulnerable. What is happening to them is not vague. It matches their behavior like a reflection in a mirror. This is why their suffering feels almost poetic, almost too exact to ignore. It is God ensuring that they taste exactly what they dished out. This makes their sickness more than just a personal trial. It becomes a message. Everyone who sees it understands that this isn't ordinary. It exposes the truth that they sowed something dark and are now reaping it in their own body. The same energy they invested in destruction has circled back to claim them. They cannot say it is bad luck. They cannot claim it is unfair. Deep down, they know the sickness is connected to their actions. It is also a reminder that no one escapes the law of spiritual consequence. People often believe they can get away with cruelty because they don't see instant results. But delayed judgment doesn't mean no judgment. When it finally comes, it comes tailored to the offense. Their sickness is the perfect evidence that God doesn't just punish, He matches. It is precise justice, designed so that even they cannot deny the connection. In the end, the sickness is not just about them, it's about the testimony it creates. Their downfall shows that every action has a return, every seed has a harvest, and every wrong finds its echo. They are living inside a punishment that perfectly fits their crime. Number 4. Their illness is a divine cease and desist order. God didn't snuff them out, He slowed them down and made their failure plain. Their sickness is a divine cease and desist because it removes the tools they use to attack you, the voice, the reach, the stamina, without erasing their existence. It's a public pause that forces them to stop operating under the illusion of control. Where they once moved freely to hurt, manipulate, or intimidate, now they are stopped by a body that refuses to cooperate. The point of that stop is not merely to punish, it's to contain the damage and give truth room to breathe. This kind of intervention is surgical. It doesn't seek theatrical revenge, it seeks containment and correction. If God had chosen death, the story would close and lessons might be lost. By leaving them alive but incapacitated, the consequences remain visible and teachable. People can see the outcome of cruelty without the cover of conspiracy or the fog of natural causes. The sick person becomes a walking notice to anyone tempted to follow the same path. There are boundaries you do not cross with other people. Their halted state also clears the air around you. When a predator is forced to stop, smear campaigns lose momentum, lies die at the source, and the targeted person gets the chance to rebuild reputation in plain view. The cease and desist isn't subtle, it's blunt and unmistakable. It removes the instruments of harm so community can reassess what was true and what was manufactured. That restoration happens precisely because the aggressor can no longer maintain the narrative they once controlled. There's another layer: humiliation as a teacher. Being stopped in public, slowed by weakness, stripped of swagger. That humiliation can either break a person or crack them open to truth. God's pause gives the offender time to reckon with what they've done, to confront their motives, and to see the damage they caused. Mercy shows up in the space this pause creates. The person is still alive and therefore still capable of change. But the humility is unavoidable. They are reduced to a condition that mirrors how they reduced others. Finally, the cease and desist warns watchers. It says plainly that God enforces certain covenants. It doesn't always strike like lightning. Sometimes he interrupts like a hand on the brake. That interruption is enough to protect the vulnerable, expose the liar, and turn a private war into a public lesson. Number 5. They mocked your wounds, now they are forced to wear their own. They treated your wounds like entertainment, turning your pain into punchlines, scrolling past your suffering with a smirk, measuring their status by how publicly they could humiliate you. That behavior reveals a cruelty that feeds on other people's collapse. Now the tables have turned in a way they cannot stage or spin. Their suffering is public, raw, and impossible to edit out of footage or social feeds. The same crowd that once cheered their jabs is now watching them stumble through the very thing they celebrated. There's a brutal symmetry to it. The humor they mined from your missteps is now the currency others use when they talk about them. Their humiliation isn't an accidental humiliation. It's the natural echo of what they set in motion. When someone makes a spectacle of another person's pain, they teach people how to look at suffering, with derision, with distance, with a hunger for gossip. That training returns like a mirror. The audience learns to watch without pity, to take amusement from another's fall. So when their body fails or their strength collapses, those same observers know how to respond, because they were trained to respond that way. The mockery they once administered becomes the lens through which their own collapse is viewed. This is what makes their downfall especially savage. It's not only the sickness that wounds them, it's the social reaction that finishes the job. There's also a moral lesson on authenticity. People who laugh at other people's pain are often performing toughness, hiding fear, or asserting superiority. When they become the center of pity or ridicule, the performance can't be maintained. The laughter disappears, the scripts vanish. What's left is a person exposed, stripped of pretense, and forced to confront what they were doing while others suffered. That exposure can be instructive if they choose to learn, or it can be crushing if they cling to pride. Either way, the spectacle forces truth into daylight. Finally, this reversal is more than punishment. It's a corrective for the community. It changes how bystanders will behave next time. Seeing the mocker become mocked teaches observers that cruelty is risky, that contempt carries consequences, and that empathy matters more than applause. The ones who once laughed have become the object lesson, and their experience rewires the cultural response to suffering, if people have eyes to see it. Their pain stops being an act and starts being a lesson, proving that how you treat others eventually defines how the world will treat you. Number 6. God didn't send the sickness to kill them, but to silence them. Their mouth was their weapon, and the sickness is the gag that takes it away. For years they used sound as ammunition, lies dressed as facts, whispers turned into campaigns, scorn sharpened into a constant broadcast aimed at breaking you. Words shaped their power. They built influence with rumors, steered crowds with falsehoods, and bruised hearts with public declarations. When speech is the engine of harm, Cutting that engine off is a surgical move. The illness doesn't erase them. It removes their ability to manipulate, to rally, to poison. Suddenly, the one who orchestrated storms can't even form a wind. This forced quiet changes everything. A voice that once multiplied lies now has to reckon with the absence of consequence. Without the daily drip of insults and accusations, narratives collapse. People who depended on that voice to validate a version of reality find themselves unmoored. The pause strips away momentum, gossip stalls, conspiracies lose shape, and the smear campaigns that required constant feeding die back of neglect. In that clearing, truth can breathe again, and the stories they once spun lose the oxygen of repetition. There's also accountability inside the quiet. When someone who used words to wound is suddenly unable to speak, the person gains a rare, unavoidable mirror. Silence forces reflection. If they use the quiet to dig deeper, to face what they did and why, the gag becomes a doorway to repentance. But if they spend it scheming around limits, the silence only magnifies their refusal to change. The difference lies in whether the enforced stillness becomes a salon of confession or a quiet place for resentment to fester. For the community, their silence is relief with teeth. It's not a showy triumph. It's a practical end to daily harm. People who were gaslit or bullied get space to rebuild their voice, to correct records, to be heard without the shadow of a louder liar drowning them out. The gag creates a rebalancing. The noisy predator is muted long enough for the wounded to be restored. Finally, this is not about annihilation, it's about neutralization. When God stops the mouth, he removes the instrument of ongoing damage without resorting to finality. That restraint gives everyone, the offender, the offended, and the witnesses, the chance to face what truth looks like when noise is gone. The silence speaks its own language, accountability, protection, and the possibility that what was weaponized can be returned to a use that builds rather than destroys. Number 7. The illness proves that touching you was a covenant violation. Their illness is more than punishment. It's courtroom proof that they crossed a line they didn't understand existed. Chosen ones carry protections and covenants that are not visible to everyone, and when someone reaches for your life, reputation, or destiny, they're not just attacking a person, they're trampling over what God has sealed. The sickness that shows up afterward reads like evidence. It ties the trespass back to the act. It's the kind of clarity that leaves no room for the usual excuses or bad timing stories. This isn't mystical fluff. It is the logic of boundaries being enforced. People who thought they were dealing with ordinary rivalry discover the rules were different. Their attacks triggered a response targeted at the violation itself. The disease isn't an arbitrary blow. It marks the moment they stepped into territory reserved for something bigger than themselves. That's why the connection is unmistakable to those who know how to see. When you attack what is under a covenant, the fallout is proportional and pointed. It lands on you in a way that lines up with the very trespass you committed. There's another layer, the social and spiritual record. When their illness surfaces after a campaign against you, others begin to read the sequence: attack, celebration, then collapse. That chain becomes testimony. It makes it harder for them to keep pretending their actions were harmless or justified. The sickness functions like an affidavit written in the body. It corroborates the truth of what happened and exposes the moral arithmetic behind it. People who are unsure start to see the pattern. The accused becomes the accused again, but now under the weight of visible consequence. This enforcement also protects the chosen one. Covenant boundaries are not arbitrary shields. They steer how justice is applied. By making the consequences visible and unmistakably connected to the violation, God prevents the cover-up that often follows powerful people's misdeeds. The result is a kind of public correction that reallocates moral weight back where it belongs. You don't just get vindicated in private. The record is set straight in front of witnesses. Finally, the point is simple and ruthless in its effectiveness. There are lines you don't cross. The sickness proves that some targets are marked and that violating that mark brings a response tailored to the affront. It's an undeniable demonstration that certain protections exist and that they are enforced. The consequence exposes the trespasser, restores balance, and warns the rest who might be tempted to test the covenant's limits. Number 8. Their sickness is not just a body issue, it's a legacy issue. Their sickness isn't confined to their body, it ripples through their lineage. When someone attacks a chosen one, they are not only challenging an individual, they are trespassing into a covenant that carries generational weight. God marks bloodlines, and the consequences of crossing what is protected don't always stop with the offender. Children, descendants, and even those connected by family ties can feel the effects of the choices made against you. This isn't punishment for innocent lives, it's the natural weight of spiritual cause and effect, a reminder that actions have far-reaching consequences beyond what is immediately visible. The energy, the malice, the hatred they directed at you imprints itself into their own system, and the repercussions follow the bloodline. It is as if the universe records the ledger of violation and ensures that lessons aren't forgotten, that patterns aren't repeated blindly. Their descendants may experience struggle, obstacles, or challenges that trace back to the original offense, not because of arbitrary judgment, but because spiritual law enforces balance. It's a stark reminder that the ripple effect of attacking someone God has marked cannot be contained. This legacy aspect also serves as a warning to others. Attacking a chosen one is never a private or isolated act. It is a trespass with a long memory, one that touches far more than the immediate target. The sickness becomes a living record of that boundary being crossed, a visible testament that consequences extend beyond a single life. Those watching can see the stakes of violation, not only in the present but in what unfolds over time. Ultimately, their suffering demonstrates the precision and depth of divine protection. God's defense isn't shallow, it is rooted in permanence, extending its reach into generations to maintain order, justice, and balance. Their war against you was never just against a person. It was against a covenant, a lineage, and a destiny. And their sickness confirms that no one tampers with what God has covered without the repercussions echoing far beyond themselves. Number 9. They preyed on your downfall, but became the answer to their own curse. Every curse they whispered, every plan they crafted to see you fall, has come full circle. Their attacks were never neutral. Every word, every thought, every act of malice carried energy that had to land somewhere. That energy, shaped by hatred and intent, was aimed at you, but like a boomerang, it found its way back. Their sickness is not a random strike, nor is it God's cruelty. It is the reflection of what they invested into the world. They built their own trap, and now they are caught in it. When people pray or speak ill against someone, they often think the power lies solely in the target. They fail to see that words and intentions have momentum, and when they carry weight, they create consequences that follow the sender. The disease, the weakness, the humiliation, they are the unavoidable return of energy misused. What they hoped would break you instead broke the balance in their own lives. Every insult, every lie, every manipulative act was recorded energetically, and the body, spirit, and circumstances become the ledger that settles the account. There's also the element of exposure. Words thrown into darkness often carry a sense of impunity. They believed no one could trace the origin of their attacks. But the sickness unmasks them, turning their own schemes into evidence written in flesh. Their body becomes the testimony of their cruelty, and the echoes of their malicious intent are visible for all to see. What they tried to project onto you, the chaos, the instability, the pain, lands squarely on them. This is not just poetic justice, it is a demonstration of spiritual law in action. Energy returns to sender because the universe, or God's justice, does not allow imbalance to persist indefinitely. When you attempt to dismantle a life under covenant, you set in motion forces that do not dissipate. They recalibrate and return, often amplified, ensuring accountability. In the end, their sickness tells a story they cannot rewrite. Every act of harm aimed at you has become a mirror reflecting their own intentions. Their downfall is not accidental. It is the exact echo of the curse they attempted to release. They preyed on your destruction, but they became the answer to their own prayer. And that is the uncompromising precision of divine justice. Number 10. The sickness exposes what their masks couldn't hide. For years they wore masks, carefully crafted facades of power, charm, intelligence, or control. They projected confidence, dominance, and competence while hiding insecurity, cruelty, and fragility underneath. To the outside world they seemed untouchable, invincible, or above reproach. But sickness doesn't lie. It doesn't care about appearances, pretense, or the narratives people build around themselves. It strips away all illusions and exposes what has been hiding beneath the surface. The disease reveals the truth in ways no argument, testimony, or confrontation could. Suddenly, the confidence they displayed collapses under its weight. The charm that once masked manipulation becomes hollow. The intelligence they flaunted cannot outmaneuver the body's failure. The world sees the fragility they spent years hiding, and the credibility they once commanded erodes with it. What they thought was hidden power is now plainly weakness. This exposure is more than just a public revelation. It's a mirror for everyone who underestimated or dismissed you. While they wore their masks to mock, control, or overshadow you, the sickness unmasks them and proves that their influence was temporary, superficial, and hollow. The contrast between their projected strength and their actual vulnerability highlights your resilience, showing the world that true power cannot be faked or forced. There's also a spiritual dimension to this. The mask is a shield against accountability, a tool to manipulate perception and avoid consequence. Sickness pierces that shield. It bypasses lies, manipulation, and spin, forcing the truth to surface in the most undeniable way. The exposure serves as both punishment and instruction. It warns others that appearances can be deceiving, but actions and intentions are never fully hidden. Ultimately, their illness unmasks a reality they could not escape. They were weak long before the symptoms arrived. Their strength was only surface deep, their control only a veneer, and their power only a performance. The sickness makes visible the emptiness behind the mask, demonstrating that no amount of manipulation or deceit can withstand the truth for long. It confirms your untouchability, while exposing their vulnerability in a way that cannot be ignored or denied. Number 11. Their sickness is a prophetic warning to others watching. Their sickness isn't just about them, it's a message in motion. The visibility of their downfall is intentional because God rarely wastes pain, even when it's corrective. By allowing their suffering to be seen, He turns their body and circumstance into a living warning sign for others who are quietly considering the same path. It's not subtle, it's not hidden. It's a billboard flashing a truth that words alone could never enforce. Don't touch what God has covered. This is why the judgment is so public. If it happened in secrecy, others could dismiss it as coincidence or bad luck. But when it unfolds in plain sight, the connection becomes hard to ignore. People start whispering, making mental notes and drawing the line for themselves. Whatever they did to that chosen one, I won't be trying it. Their sickness becomes a deterrent, and their humiliation becomes the cautionary tale that resets the boundaries of respect. God knew that if He didn't make it visible, the lesson would be lost, and someone else would rise up to repeat the cycle. There's a justice in this exposure. Those who were watching your story unfold now see a reversal that speaks louder than explanations. You don't have to justify yourself, and you don't have to argue with skeptics. Their collapse argues for you. Their silence testifies in your defense. Their frailty becomes the punctuation mark on a long sentence of cruelty. What once looked like you being the weak one now looks like God using your endurance as the setup for a striking demonstration. And here's the raw truth. This warning is not only for enemies, it's for spectators too. It forces everyone who saw your mistreatment to choose how they'll align themselves in the future. Will they dare to join in the cruelty, or will they recognize the cost of such rebellion? God makes examples not out of pettiness but out of protection, so that those who thought of trying you next will stop before they start. Their sickness is prophecy in flesh. It declares the untouchability of those marked by God. It speaks louder than sermons, louder than arguments, and louder than excuses. It says in plain terms, crossing into covenant territory has consequences, and those consequences are not confined to whispers in heaven. They break into reality for all to see. Number 12. The illness is proof that energy returns to sender. They built altars out of words and actions, small ceremonies of gossip, invitations to envy, plans to sabotage. Those rituals were not harmless, they were deliberate energy directed at you. Energy follows intention, and intention gathers power when repeated. All that focused hostility needed a place to land, and the universe redirected it back to the sender. Now their body has become the altar, and whatever they spent years pouring out is curdling inside them. Gossip is a form of investment. The time they spent whispering your name, rehearsing lies, and designing traps was not wasted. It compounded into a force. Jealousy is fuel. Sabotage is ritual. They lit those fires every day, and the flames consumed more than their targets. They consumed the architects. When that same force finds its way inward, it shows up as physical breakdowns, chronic pain, unexplained fatigue, and illnesses that refuse easy labels. The body records the ledger of where energy was spent. This returning energy is neither mystical accident nor moralistic punishment. It is natural law in action. You cannot expect to float negative force into the world without it influencing the vessel that released it. Their hostility imprinted itself on their nervous system, on sleep patterns, and on the micro-decisions of their life. Habits of contempt change hormone levels, stress responses, and immune systems. Over time, that physiological toll accelerates into disease. In that sense, their body becoming the altar is simply the physical accounting of spiritual and emotional investment. There's a visible irony here. They intended to make you the example, to mark you for failure. Instead, they became the cautionary example. Friends who once nodded at their schemes now watch them collapse under the weight they created. The altar image fits because altars are places of offering. What they offered was toxicity, and the world accepted that offering and returned it. The lesson is brutally practical. If you spend your life investing in other people's ruin, expect a return on that investment, but don't expect the return to be profit. It will be a physical and social bill that arrives with no courtesy. For the chosen one, the sight of their enemy weakened by their own altar is vindication. For the enemy, it is a ledger of consequence. Energy returning to sender is not superstition. It is cause and effect, written plainly on the body. It's simple. What you pour out eventually finds its home, and it stays. Permanently. Number 13. Their weakness confirms your untouchability. Their sickness isn't a random act of misfortune. It's a signpost, a living demonstration that God's protection over you cannot be breached. It's easy to think that defense is passive, that surviving attacks is mere luck or timing. But when your enemies are struck down while targeting you, the truth becomes undeniable. Your shield is active and it's precise. Their weakness confirms that no matter how clever, how relentless, or how brazen they are, they cannot touch what God has reserved for you. This isn't about their body or their suffering. It's about visibility. God didn't just defend you in secret. He made the defense obvious. People who were watching, people who were complicit, people who were planning their own attempts, now see that there is an untouchable layer surrounding you. It's not a shield they can reason around, manipulate, or overpower. Every attempt they made to break you only highlights the futility of human schemes against divine protection. The illness becomes a public testimony, a signal that God's intervention is both real and unstoppable. It also rewrites the narrative. Where once your enemies may have painted you as weak, vulnerable, or exposed, their downfall demonstrates the opposite. Your untouchability is now validated in the court of observation. Witnesses see the pattern. The ones who attacked, mocked, or plotted against you are incapacitated while you remain intact. Their failures reflect your invincibility. This is not ego, it's evidence. Beyond observation, their weakness carries a message to anyone who might consider testing you in the future. It establishes limits in a way that words never could. Threats, plots, and schemes are met not with human retaliation, but with divine precision. It signals that crossing a chosen one is not a gamble. It is a guaranteed loss. Ultimately, their sickness confirms more than protection. It confirms destiny. You are operating under a covenant and a shield that is strategic, exact, and inscrutable. God's intervention does not just save. You are elevated by the proof of untouchability, made untouchable not only in reality, but in the perception of the world. Their weakness is the spotlight that highlights your invulnerability, a living statement that some forces, no matter how determined, will never overcome what God has secured. Number 14, they are learning that delay does not mean escape. When the first blows landed and nothing immediate happened, they breathed relief as if the scoreboard had frozen in their favor. That relief was deception. Delay is not escape. It is patience rehearsed by justice. God's timing is not the same as human impatience. He allows time to pass for reasons that are strategic, not sentimental. That passing of time gives arrogance a chance to grow, and that growth makes the later correction hit with more moral weight. What looked like luck or forgetfulness was actually withholding, holding back the final answer until the moment would serve as the clearest demonstration of cause and effect. This delay is a test and a trap. It tests whether the offender will soften, repent, or continue to escalate. It traps the one who reads patience as permission and doubles down on cruelty. When the reaction finally arrives, it lands on a person who believed they had outrun consequence. That belief makes the fall worse because pride inflates the cost of humiliation. The sickness that comes after a period of seeming calm is heavier because it carries all the unanswered moments inside it. Every insult, every lie, every plotted setback adds weight. The body does not just become sick at a single instance, it collapses under the accumulated ledger of every wrong. There's a public logic to delay. Quick vengeance can be written off as pettiness. Immediate retaliation can look like a personal grudge. When justice waits, however, the later event reads like an audit rather than a tantrum. People see the chronological sequence: offense, arrogance, delay, then consequence. That sequence exposes intent and removes plausible deniability. Observers who once shrugged begin to place events into moral order, recognizing a pattern rather than a random occurrence. Delay sharpens the narrative. It converts rumor into evidence. Delay also serves mercy. By not striking immediately, the opportunity for repentance remains open. The offender has time to change course. That mercy is not weakness. It is an ethical demand placed on the offender to choose differently. Refusing that demand doubles down on culpability, and the eventual correction becomes an instruction for the community about what happens when mercy is squandered. In the end, delay is a clarifying instrument. It separates the accidental from the intentional, teaches that time does not erase moral accounting, and ensures that when a consequence arrives, it carries the full weight of the wrongdoing. The sickness proves this truth in living color. Nothing truly slips through when a covenant has been broken. Everything we've explored reveals a truth that cannot be ignored. When God's chosen ones are attacked, the consequences are precise, public, and undeniable. Every act of malice, every word of envy, every attempt to sabotage was never just against you. It was against a covenant, a destiny that cannot be shaken. Their sickness is not random, not a mere misfortune. It is the evidence of boundaries violated, energy misdirected, and divine justice executed with surgical accuracy. It's a warning, a correction, and a declaration all at once. Through their downfall, God demonstrates the futility of human schemes against his protection. Their weakness proves your untouchability. Their collapse confirms that the forces arrayed against you, no matter how clever or relentless, will never prevail over what God has ordained. Every laugh they directed at your pain now echoes back in humiliation. Every plot they crafted returns like a boomerang of consequence. Their bodies and circumstances become living testimonies that attacking a chosen one is not just dangerous, it is fatal to pride, influence, and false security, and the lesson extends beyond them. Their suffering becomes a prophetic warning to the world, a vivid display that teaches spectators, envious peers, and would-be attackers that some boundaries are untouchable. God does not act in secrecy when protection is needed. He acts in ways that are visible, unmistakable, and instructive. He turns cruelty into evidence, malice into a mirror, and attacks into lessons that rewrite the narrative of who is safe, who is untouchable, and who carries divine favor. For you, the chosen one, this is ultimate vindication. It's not just survival, it's triumph. Every attempt against you has reinforced your strength, your covenant, and your destiny. Your enemy's collapse illuminates your invincibility in ways that words cannot. It's a reminder that your protection is active, your path is secured, and your power is undeniable. So remember this: their downfall is not your doing, it's divine orchestration. Their suffering is not chaos, it's calibrated justice. And your untouchability is no longer a secret. It is a living, breathing truth the world cannot deny. You are marked, shielded, and confirmed. And anyone watching now knows, attacking a chosen one is not just reckless, it is impossible to succeed. Now make sure to subscribe, like, comment, and share this message, because the world needs to see what happens when God's covenanted ones are defended in full measure. If this message hit you hard and opened your eyes, make sure you subscribe to the channel so you never miss the truth God reveals. Like this video if you feel the power of protection over the chosen ones. Comment below with your thoughts, experiences, or any aha moments you've had today. And don't forget to share this video with anyone who needs to see what happens when God defends those under his covenant. Every click, every share, every comment helps spread the message that some protections are untouchable and some victories are divine. God bless you.